Welcome back to Mystifying Miracles. Do I have a story for you today? Imagine you're laying there in a hospital bed. You can't move. You can't talk. You can't see. But you can hear. You can hear everything, including the doctors, your family, all of it. And you hear that you've been declared brain dead, but you're not. What do you do? That's exactly what happens in today's story, and I'm going to get into it, so stay tuned. On November 19th in 2007, it's in Wichita Falls, Texas, when a 21-year-old man by the name of Zack Dunlap, he had been declared brain dead. Now, he had many head injuries and he had been laying in a hospital bed due to the injuries that he sustained while riding all-terrain vehicles, so four-wheelers. Now, I know I said this in the beginning, but it is just so powerful. I mean, imagine you're laying there like Zack was. And what he heard the doctors say, he heard them say that Zack, was brain dead. And he heard about them talking about them, they're going to take out his organs to be harvested. And he knows he's alive and can't do a thing about it. Well, we'll kind of start from the beginning on his. After he graduated high school, he moved in to live with his family in Frederick, Oklahoma. And, during that time, he worked in a warehouse. A passion of his and several of his friends were riding four-wheelers. In fact, they described Zack as having no fear. They even called him the outlaw. Well, a few days prior to Thanksgiving in 2007, the town had a local parade. Zack and his friends took their four-wheelers and they rode in the parade. It was a great time by all. Every so often, Zack and his friends, they would pop a wheelie here or there, and the crowd just went wild. They loved it. Well, when the parade was over, it was about sunset. Zack, one of his good buddies named Colton, and a few other buddies, they ride their four-wheelers back home. And for whatever reason, Zack fell behind the rest of the group just a bit. So he tried to speed up to try to catch up at one point. And when he got caught back up, he decides to pop a cool little wheelie. But that was a terrible mistake. When his wheels came back down to hit the pavement, it was so close to Colton's four-wheeler that Zack had to kind of swerve because he didn't want to hit his friend. And Colton says the last thing he remembers is seeing Zack with his four-wheeler just turning in the air. And then it comes back down to hit the pavement, and Zack was not wearing a helmet. Colton remembers seeing his friend, unfortunately, lying face down on the pavement and not moving. He wasn't responding to anybody calling him or trying to help him, so immediately Colton dials 911. When the ambulance pulled up, it was now dark and chilly. And at the same time this is happening, as the ambulance is getting there and all, not too far away is Zack's 80-year-old grandmother. And she had been just sitting there at home, and she had been listening to a little police scanner that she had. Something she heard was a bit concerning, and she knew that her grandson, Zack, was riding four-wheelers in the area, so she decides to call his mother, Pam, just to check up, make sure he's okay. So she asked Pam, wanted to make sure Zack was safe at home, heard this on the police scanner, and I'm not sure what those details were, but obviously she heard the call go out to wherever Zack was, but she didn't know at the time it was Zack. Well, not too long after that, Pam gets the call about Zack, so she rushes up to the ER. Now, this is a local hospital, so they aren't very equipped to handle this kind of matter. So Pam just remembers being in panic mode. According to her husband, Doug remembers Pam telling him that day or night she had seen, I guess, some gray matter, and she thought it was brain matter coming out of Zack's ear. So that, put her into hysterics because she didn't, know what was going on. This was such a big shock. Pam also remembers just falling down to her knees in that ER And she just screams out, no, 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 this isn't going to happen. And she just immediately drops into prayer. Well, because again, this is a little local hospital, they're not equipped to deal with this kind of traumatic brain injury. So Zack had to be flown to another hospital that was equipped to deal with this. The closest one to them at the time was a hospital in Wichita Falls, Texas. And unfortunately, that was 50 miles away. So take a little bit of time just for his parents and everybody to get over there, but they care flighted Zack over to that hospital. When he got there, he was on a ventilator. So while he's on the ventilator, doctors repair all the broken bones. He had a broken collarbone and he had several broken skull fractures, but they were able to repair them, so that's good. The doctors at that time, though, they were very concerned about the building pressure in Zack's brain. This was a very dangerous situation. One of the doctors that was treating him, by the name of Dr. Mercer, spoke to Pam and the rest of his family about Zack. And basically the way he described Zack's head injuries, he used the word catastrophic. He told him, look, this is not looking good. And as time ticked by, Zack's condition worsened. He wasn't responding to any sensory stimulation. That's not a good sign. So the doctors decide to do 2 different scans. And what they're looking for is blood flow. They want to know, is there any blood flow in Zack's brain? Well, the results come back and they're devastating. And reason being, because they showed no blood flow, not some blood flow, none. And they did 2 scans showing this. Doctors inform his family, and they then have to break the news that we're so sorry, but Zack, he's brain dead. They had to think about it for a bit, but his family, they finally decided against having Zack on this long-term artificial life support if he's brain dead. Like, they thought that would be cruel. And his folks, they also knew that Zack was a donor. They knew because they saw it on his license. And so doctors began chatting with them about that. And his parents finally gave the okay that, all right, it's okay to harvest his organs, give it to somebody who's in need. The first organ that was to be taken was going to be Zack's heart. And according to medical staff at that point, they told his parents that things would begin to get underway anytime between 12 and 24 hours. In the meantime, while they're waiting, his family and friends began saying their goodbyes and spending time with Zack. Now, Zack's death, it was actually notated in his chart at 11:10 a.m. that morning, which was about 36 hours after the accident occurred, was when he was finally declared brain dead. Now, as the family and everybody's saying their goodbyes, spending time, meanwhile, the organ donor helicopter is landing on the helipad. But a miracle was about to occur. Zack's grandmother, remember her? She, at this point, was having the worst time saying goodbye. She couldn't do it, and she wouldn't do it. She went over to Zack in his bed, and she began praying over him. And she prayed that, God, please, it can't be his time yet. Please, Lord, do a miracle. She just begins praying and praying. And that's when divine intervention, well, I guess you could say it was set in motion. Zack's cousins by the name of Dan and Christy Coffin were there at the hospital. Dan himself happened to be a nurse. He wasn't working there, but he was a nurse, so he knew how to read everything, all the machines and all that good stuff. These 2 cousins went over to Zack's bed. They kind of just talked with him gently, and they said, quote, Zack, if you're in there, if you can hear me, ask God to help you. Not even 10 minutes goes by. And Christy says she got a gut feeling. And that feeling, she said she knew. She wasn't squirrely about it, or maybe, no. She says she knew it was not Zack's time to go. So Dan, he had been monitoring the vital signs, all the machines, and, as this is going on, he begins to see that the vital signs look a tad better. Not like crazy better, but better than anything it's looked like so far. So Dan gets an idea. He takes out his pocket knife that was in his pocket and he grabs Zack's foot and he runs it up the bottom of it. He's trying to see if there's any sensory stimulation. Well, when he did that, Zack jerked his foot right out of Dan's hand. So the family that was in the room at the time was just like, what just happened? They thought, is this possible? Oh my gosh, is he alive? Well, a nurse of Zack's was also in the room at this time. Her name was Brenda Yasaga, and she wasn't buying it. She told the family that, look, this kind of reflex, it's common. It's even common after brain death, like in Zack's case. So Dan gets another idea. He decides to grab Zack's hand. And what he did is he used his own fingernail and stuck it up under one of Zack's. Another kind of sensory stimulation test. And when he did this, Zack threw his arm all the way across to the other side of the bed. So it wasn't just like a little bloop reflex. It was like he jerked it and went woof, woof, all the way over to the other side of the bed. Well, Brenda, the nurse, of course, her jaw drops and she's like, I need to get Dr. Mercer stat. So she goes to do that. Family is just flabbergasted. They're like, oh my gosh, because this was purposeful movement. This was not a tiny reflex. So they knew, Dan and Christy for sure knew. It was now 4 hours after Zack had been declared brain dead. So when all this occurred, they were doing this little test and all that. Zack's parents had been out in the hallway, so they didn't see or hear this. So Zack's sister, Casey, runs out into the hall and tells them what just transpired. And of course, they tell Grandma, who was out there as well. Now, does that not sound amazing, guys? Well, 5 days passes and Zack opens his eyeballs. And a few days after that, he's able to be taken off the ventilator. That same day he was taken off the ventilator, Zack squeezed his parents' hands for the first time. And when the neurosurgeon came in a week later, he held up 2 fingers and did a few tests, and he realized, oh my gosh, Zack is indeed awake and aware. It was December 2nd of 2007 when Zack finally spoke to his parents, and he told them, I love you. On that same day he said that, he was able to take his first steps. During all of this, doctors are baffled. I mean, they cannot explain any of this from a scientific standpoint. And they said so. They knew that, oh my gosh, this is a miracle because this doesn't happen. This is unheard of. Well, 5 weeks after the accident had occurred, Zack finally graduated and left the Jim Thorpe Rehabilitation Center. And while Zack wouldn't be 100% at this time, he was very close to normal. And, about that time, he started having flashback memories of those first few days that he had been in the hospital. And he told his parents about it. He told them when everyone thought he was gone, and he heard the doctors say he was brain dead, and he heard the doctors talk about how they were going to harvest his organs, he couldn't do a thing. He's like, he remembers telling his parents, I was mad. I was mad because I knew I was alive and everybody else thought I was brain dead and I couldn't move, talk, do a thing about it. Well, all in all, 48 days after he had been declared brain dead, Zack, he left a hospital and he was fine and he was better. When he finally did come home, he came home to a huge crowd cheering him on. I mean, community members, friends, family, they knew that this was a blessing, that he was alive, and they were humbled by this incredible miracle. And his mother, Pam Dunlap, she says, quote, "We both feel that God has some big plan for Zack. We'll do everything in our power to help him pursue it, whatever it is," end quote. Zack told reporters about the time he got home, he said that he didn't have any plans to four-wheel again, even though he used to love doing it. He said that he was going to maybe pursue something a little bit more tame, like fishing. What did you think about that? Had you ever read this story, heard about Zack Dunlap? I loved this story. It is so beautiful, and I think it just speaks volumes to people. Whether you believe in miracles or not, you cannot deny this thing. I mean, it's incredible. I want to know your thoughts, though. So let me know what you thought of the story, if you like these type of stories. And I just want to thank you. Thank you for watching and for being kind and for the wonderful comments I get. Thank you so much. It means so much to me. And I hope you guys have a blessed week, and I'll see you next time.